আজকের কথায় কথায় আসরে আমরা অতিথি হিসেবে আপনাদের উপহার দিতে চলেছি একজন স্বপ্নের মানুষকে। তিনি আমাদের স্মৃতি এবং সত্তার অঙ্গ। নেতাজি সুভাষচন্দ্র বসু তার আজাদ হিন্দ ফৌজ যখন গড়েছিলেন, তার নারী বাহিনীর সর্বাধিনায়ক করেছিলেন আমার সামনে উপস্থিত এই মহিলাকে, যাকে আপনারা অজস্র ছবিতে দেখেছেন, অবিস্মরণীয় ছবিতে দেখেছেন, অ্যালবামে। আজকে তিনি রক্ত মাংসে আমার সামনে বসে আছেন। বিশ্বাস করা যায় না, এই অপূর্ব ব্যক্তিত্ব ও সৌন্দর্যের মানুষটি ৮৬ বছর পার করেছেন এবং এখনো সচল, এখনো সেই বুদ্ধিদীপ্ত তার উপস্থিতি এবং কথাবার্তা। আমি সর্বাগ্রে তাকে নমস্কার করছি আমাদের প্রতিষ্ঠানের তরফ থেকে। আর আপনারা বুঝতেই পাচ্ছেন, ওনার সঙ্গে আমাকে ইংরেজিতে কথা বলতে হবে, কিন্তু এটা হবে স্মৃতির আসর। আপনারা শুনতে থাকুন। ম্যাডাম, would you please describe for my audience, for our viewers, the first experience of setting your eyes on Netaji? What was it like? What was the feeling like when you really saw him in flesh and blood?
Actually, the very first time that I saw Subhash Chandra Bose was in Calcutta in 1928 during the Indian National Congress, when he was the head of the Congress Seva Dal, volunteers. And at that time I was 15 years old, and I had accompanied my mother to the Congress. But many of us young people used to slip away from the house early in the morning and go to the Maidan and watch him taking the parading his volunteers and teaching them how to be smart and efficient. And of course they had no arms, but even their lathis he made them wield like rifles. But his main thing was, emphasis was on discipline. And of course there was a lot of discussion about it. All the elders were against what he was doing, and they felt that he was bringing in violence into Gandhiji's non-violent movement. But we youngsters were very thrilled by his way he conducted.
It was then that you decided to be a part of the army, if you ever went to bring up one?
No, at that time we never
there was
thought.
No question
there was no question of
yes,
army or anything.
True.
But I have personally felt that he was really the leader,
your leader.
Worth watching, because after all, every movement, everything has to progress.
You're from Kerala, aren't you?
Yes, originally we are from Kerala, but my father had settled down in Madras.
In Madras.
I was born in Madras. I had all my education there.
And why were you in Calcutta then?
My mother had come to attend the All India
Congress. Yes, Congress.
She was a staunch Congress person right till the end. In fact, she was also
You had already made up your mind that you were a Subhashite when you first saw him at age 15.
Well, I can't say actually, because you see, I was also had to, one thing I was determined that I must complete my studies. But I felt that Subhash Bose was the person to watch and to follow.
You actually passed the medical examination before you joined INA. You were a complete doctor then,
yes,
weren't you?
Because I only went to Singapore.
Can you tell us how it all began? I mean, how you really went to join INA?
No, you see, what happened was when I completed my medical, I finished my MBBS, I also did a postgraduate diploma, DGO, and I was ready to, I didn't want to join government service, and private practice for a beginner was very difficult. And at that time there was a move by the British to recruit women doctors also into the Indian medical service. In fact, they later did. And I was very afraid that I might be forced to join that. So fortunately I had many relatives and friends in Singapore. And one of my very close cousins, who was like a sister to me, she was very ill at that time. So she asked me to go to Singapore to see her and whether I could help her in any way. So that's how I went to Singapore in 1940. And then I started practice there. And actually going to Singapore was a big eye-opener, because for the first time I felt what it was like to be an Asian, not only an Indian, but an Asian. Because there, there was such a great difference, gulf between the Asians and the non-Asians, especially the whites, the British. And there were so many places that were forbidden to Asians. And among the Asians also, Indians were all the lowest strung. So we felt we had a lot to fight for there, and we had a lot to do. So I was there, and then the Japanese attacked on the 8th of December 1941, and they overran Malaysia by February 1942, when the British Army surrendered to the Japanese. And in the British Army there were about 60,000 Indian officers and soldiers. And along with the Japanese came an old revolutionary who, I'm afraid, so far hasn't been given his due in our country, Rashbihari Bose.
Rashbihari Bose, of course.
Because people don't remember, probably the younger generation, but in 1911 he threw a bomb at the Viceroy, missed the Viceroy but killed a few other people, and then he fled. Of course the British were trying their best to trace him, because they would have hanged him the moment they got hold of him. But he outwitted them and got onto a steamer and went to Japan. And there he was very lucky. He was befriended by a very influential Japanese group called the Black Dragon Group. And they, in spite, because at that time Japan and Britain were not enemies, they were allies in the First World War. So the British government tried very hard to get Rashbihari Bose extradited from Japan to India, but the Japanese refused to surrender him, and so he stayed on there. And all the time he was there, he had only one thought in his mind, that somehow he must do something which will help India to get independence. And even at that stage he felt that at one time Japan would strike against Great Britain and all the colonial powers, and that was the time that India should make use of. So he bided his time, and he formed an organization there called the Indian Independence League, which he set up in all the places later which were occupied by the Japanese. And he accompanied the Japanese when they came to Malaysia and Singapore. And the Japanese bombers, along with their bombs, also threw lakhs and lakhs of pamphlets asking Indian soldiers to give up their arms and not to fight alongside of the British, but to fight up against them. And so we saw all this, and so there was a sort of feeling was building up.
When was it that you first came to know about Netaji being in Singapore and...
No, you see what happened then. After that, we first came to hear that Netaji had escaped from India, that he had gone to Germany, and his broadcast from there we used to hear. But the INA was formed first before Netaji came.
Yes, of course.
And Captain Mohan Singh, he was the later turned general, he was the commander-in-chief. But that was a purely ex-Indian army organization. There were no civilians in it, and of course women were very far away. But things didn't go well with Mohan Singh and the Japanese, because there was mistrust on both sides. And so all of us, the civilians and people who were not in the army, were rather worried as to what was the future. And it was then that many of the senior INA officers, of which my late husband, Colonel P.K. Saigal, was also one of them, they persuaded Rashbihari Bose to put pressure on the Japanese to bring Subhash Chandra Bose from Germany to East Asia. Because they knew that in Germany, in Europe, he had no role to play at all. But here he had a lot. So it was in 1943, in July, that I first really came in contact with Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. And
what was the first meeting like?
The first meeting was, I was one among a large number of Indians, and many women also, who much against the wishes of the Japanese military administration, we insisted that we also will go to the airport to receive Subhash Chandra Bose. And actually the first day when we went there, we waited for about 3 hours, and later we knew it was due to bad weather conditions, but his plane never arrived. So of course people said that this was a hoax and that he was not coming at all. But anyway, the next day when we went again, he did arrive. And then on the...
Was he in military uniform there?
No, when he came he was in civilian uniform.
Civilian dress.
Yeah, civilian dress. But he had a Gandhi cap and a suit. And he came on the 3rd, and on the 5th there was a big meeting in what was the largest hall there at that time, the Cathay Hall, where all Indian delegates from the whole of East Asia, that was Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Hong Kong, and even Shanghai, all these people, we had a meeting there. And that's where Raj Bihari Bose handed over the presidentship and the leadership to Subhash Chandra Bose.
Yes.
And up till that time he was in civilian dress.
How would you describe him as a commander? What was his presence like, his attitude, his interaction with the army, his interaction with people like you who were controlling the regiment?
His interaction was such that each person whom he addressed felt that he was probably the most important person for Subhash Chandra Bose, because he listened to every detail that one told him, and he was very patient, and he gave his ideas, but he never forced his ideas on you. And as for the army was concerned, for them it was really an eye-opener. For one thing, the Indian army had always been kept aloof from politicians in India, so they really had no political experience or even any interaction with any leading politician of India. So for them it was really an eye-opener, and the amount of military detail that he knew was also another...
Really?
Yes, because he had studied it.
He had prepared himself for
Yes,
that.
he studied it very consistently, and he knew all about the strategy of the German army, of the British army, and various, right from Napoleon downwards. In fact, he studied all these things very clearly.
Did you know what job you were heading for when you went to meet him?
Yes, I did, because you see, from the moment that he arrived, I was pestering the people around him that I wanted an interview. So then I was told that Netaji himself was looking for some women to organize some work that he had, and so my name was given, and I went, and the president of the Indian Independence League of Singapore, Mr. Yalapa, who was a barrister, he told me, be prepared for quite a shock, because it's not an ordinary job that he wants of women. So I went in a way prepared, but I even then didn't dream that it was going to be a regiment.
And what did he want to know of you?
So he spoke to me for about 5 hours, and he traced all the history of the independence movement in India. For him the starting point was 1857, and he said at that time, you know, that Rani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi, Begum Hazrat Mahal, and so many women played a very noble part, and they did their best to prevent the British conquest. And he always remembered, you know, there was one General May, I think he was, a Britisher, who defeated the Rani of Jhansi on the field of battle, and in his memoirs he had written, if there had been 1,000 women like the Rani of Jhansi, we could never have conquered India, because the way she fought with such determination and with such courage, I have hardly ever experienced.
When Rani Jhansi regiment was formed and you were given the charge of it, how many women were you commandeering?
Well, we started with 300. But
and it grew into? And it grew to?
It grew to 1,500.
1,500.
Right.
That's pretty big, I mean.
Yes, because...
And what kind of service did you sort of distribute amongst your female
Well,
soldiers?
we were trained as infantry soldiers. We were given the same training that infantry soldiers were given. And in addition, we had a nursing corps also of 200 women. And then we also had some women who were trained in sort of clerical jobs and all that for the
Were you
army.
called to do some field action, like shooting and...
Yes, of course. You see, we were trained in Singapore. We had another camp also in Rangoon. And then from Singapore, we went to Burma. And I was lucky, I went along with Netaji by plane. But the members of the regiment, they came by train, came by that death railway. And on the way, they were bombed many times. And they had had very narrow escapes, but they all managed to arrive in Singapore. And after that, in Rangoon, from Rangoon, then we proceeded to go further into the front. We were going up to Imphal, but we didn't get right to Imphal. Midway at Mandalay, we had to turn back. And while we were retreating, we fought many guerrilla actions with the British guerrillas who had been dropped by plane. So we had encounters with them.
So when you initially joined the INA, what were the reactions of your family? Were they shocked or they approved of it?
No, I didn't have much of my
scared?
immediate family there. I only had some cousins and things like that. So.
And your mother? Or she had died then?
No, but she was in India, you know.
India? No, but you were corresponding with her, weren't
No,
you?
those days it was very difficult, you know. We used to broadcast, but later our broadcast was so heavily jammed by the British that none of our family got any of the messages that we sent.
Right.
So she didn't...
When was that picture taken? You smartly taking the salute of your army, you're looking wonderful, walking beside Netaji.
That was on the 23rd of October of 1943.
And where was that?
That was in Singapore.
In Singapore. And how did you sort of prepare yourself for the life? Was it very difficult at the beginning, or was it always difficult, or it just came
difficult,
natural?
but you know, a disciplined life is easy to get to, and actually living in Singapore at that time was difficult in any case, because after the Japanese occupation, you know, Singapore was such a place that every bit of food material, everything came from outside. They grew nothing at all.
True.
In spite of the fact that the Chinese, right early before the war started even, had offered to provide, grow vegetables and things like that, but the British never allowed that. Everything came from outside. So in that way, living was difficult. And
what were your staple food in the army?
in the army later it became whatever we could get.
Really?
But rice.
Was it a beg, borrow or steal kind of situation?
No, it was now. Before Netaji came, I don't know what their thing was. But after he came, you see, he set up regular departments for everything. And soon after, as well as recruiting manpower, material, so he made all the rich Indians contribute, and we even had a bank of our own there. So we used to buy our foodstuff, and mostly from Thailand.
Right.
And in Burma also we didn't have much trouble of food, because that was a very good rice growing area, vegetables and everything like that. Actually it was wheat which was a bit of problem, because the people in those areas are more used to rice, not wheat.
Right.
And the soldiers, especially those from the north, are only used to wheat.
Bread.
But that we managed to barter with the Japanese, because they didn't have much use for that atta and things. So.
And what was Netaji's life like in the army? Did you were very close to him during those days. How did his life go? I mean, from say dawn to midnight.
Well, I don't know when he ever slept or when he did, because every moment was taken up with something. And of course, he was the army was his chief concern. So he used to be very particular about their training and about their equipment and about their food. And even to the extent that he had his personal doctor with him, who was also Army Colonel D.S. Raju. So he told him one day, he said, you know, I think we are all eating too much. After all, we are leading sedentary lives, and the army has to fight. And so I want from tomorrow, all of us should get only the army ration and nothing more than that. So of course there was great consternation.
What was meant by army ration?
Army ration was just chapatis and dal and some basic sabji, and so nothing fancy or things like that.
What was your life like in INA?
Mine was very, I also
Was it a very hectic life?
Yes, because I lived in the camp, so when I used to also undergo the same training, then often I had to attend with Netaji for other functions, especially when we went to Burma and Thailand and all, meet the functionaries there.
If you look back at your life, what exactly made you throw yourself into this warring career, this soldier's life, this INA? Was it mere ideal or a kind of fascination for Netaji?
No, the
person?
thing was that I was very much in the freedom struggle from my student days, and felt that we have to get our freedom. And this seemed the most rational way, that somehow we must have an armed struggle, and here was the opportunity for an armed struggle, so we must make full use of it. I mean, there was no sort of glamour of being a soldier or wanting to kill people. That is the great mistake people made between our armed struggle and the non-violent. They think that we were out for blood, which is not so. But the final blow had to come.
And it wasn't pure romanticism.
No, it was not romanticism at all, because it was the hardest life we had.
Yes.
So.
And what was your first reaction to the news that Netaji is no more?
Of course, because you see, at that time I was in Burma, working in an army INA hospital for soldiers who were disabled and couldn't move, and so we only got the news a couple of days later. But at first, we were all completely, we were sure that this was a ruse of Netaji's, and that to put the British office track that he had done. But then later, when I went back to Rangoon and met people, and especially war correspondents and all that, there seemed no reason to disbelieve the fact that he had been killed.
You still hold that he is no more?
Oh,
I
absolutely.
mean, of course, he wouldn't be living anyway,
No,
but that he died with the air crash.
I still hold that air crash, because afterwards when I came to Delhi, I met Colonel Habibur Rahman, and he was still in the Red Fort. And then we had long talk, and then he told us the whole thing and Netaji's last moments, and that's how at the end he sort of became delirious, and he mistook Habib for his Hassan, who had come with him from Germany and who was very close to him, was his secretary. So he called out Hassan, and it was, so then Habib went up to him. And
how has life been after INA for you?
Has
it been very dull compared to what you have gone through?
Not a question of dull, it's been most disappointing and tragic.
Why?
The first blow was the partition, because we especially were totally unprepared for it, because we never believed that this movement for Pakistan had grown so strong. And because in the INA we had so many Muslim officers and men, all came from the western part of Punjab. And for them also, the thought of going to a different country or a separate country never arose. And we felt that since we had achieved in the INA complete unity, that it was only a question of really understanding one another, and there was no need for this country to be partitioned, and in partitioning we would really lose more than what we could ever hope to gain.
So what have you been doing all these years after the partition? You didn't join politics in the real sense. You stayed away from it with your own memories of those warring days and memories of Netaji. You've been speaking of him, writing of him. In fact, you've written your autobiography very lately. What is it called?
A Revolutionary Life.
Yes. I mean, is it the biggest happening in your life, Netaji?
Yes, definitely there is.
You named your daughter Shubhashini after Subhash Babu.
Yeah.
And she is a CPIM activist.
So am I.
Yes, you are also
I
a
am
CPIM. I mean, how does she look upon Subhash Babu? your daughter Subhashini?
Why? With great admiration and
Does
great.
she look at him as a kind of family heritage kind of thing?
Family and country also.
No, her relation to Netaji through you and father.
Yeah, yes.
And how is Netaji regarded in your part of the country like Kanpur or,
No, unfortunately,
I mean, parts of Uttar Pradesh, which is very much...
it's he's not known properly there in those areas, you know, especially in the Hindi belt. There are certain people who were with him in the forward bloc and old congressmen, but they are dying out. But their children and the generations that have come know little or nothing about.
But how does this aura and this awe of Netaji still carry on? Because he's still regarded as the most spellbinding presence in Indian public life. Even today, I mean, he's the most popular person in Maharashtra, for instance.
Yes, in Tamil Nadu he's the
In
most
Tamil
popular.
Nadu, yes.
It's not aura because those people who were in his party here or in the INA, because you must remember that one half of the civilians who joined the INA from the South India.
Right.
So those people and their descendants and the descendants, they have never allowed Netaji's memory to fade, and they have kept it alive and told their children and they told their people. So he is all the time looked up to, and people feel that he was the leader that we needed.
You and your daughter, because both of you are of the CPIM camp, do you have a kind of your Marx CPIM explanation of Netaji? Do you sort of explain him in your ideology in some
Yes,
sort
of course,
way?
because actually my husband and to myself, we were the ones who spoke to Comrade Jyoti Basu and who agreed after hearing us speak, because at one stage during his underground career in the 42, he stayed with us. He came to know and he admitted that independence, national independence and freedom from the foreign yoke was necessary before we could think of other forms of political ideology. And he admitted that it was a mistake not to recognize and this thing that he was calling him a Japanese or a German.
And all that
was all
yes.
quite wrong. That was admitted by
One
him.
last question. You're 86 years old. You're mentally totally agile. You look nearly half your age. How have you been able to maintain this? What is your daily regimen? What is your life?
Mostly because I think I don't think of myself. I think of the people of our country and what a lot more we have to do with them.
And
for
what is
them.
your daily work? Are you still a practicing doctor?
Yeah. I go to my clinic up about 9 o'clock and come back at 2 or 3 whenever the patients finish.
And you don't feel your age?
No, when I'm working I don't feel my age. Afterwards I do.
ও আপনারা শুনলেন আমাদের অতি প্রিয় মানুষ লক্ষ্মী সেগাল, যিনি আইনেতে ছিলেন লক্ষ্মী স্বামীনাথন হিসেবে। আপনারা দেখতে পাচ্ছেন কি চমৎকার সুন্দর চেহারা মানুষটার, আর এত কাছের লোক, আমাদের এত প্রিয়জন। আমরা এর সম্পর্কে পড়তাম, একে ছবিতে দেখতাম, আজই সামনে শুনলাম। আমরা কি করে একে ধন্যবাদ দেবো? ধন্যবাদ দেওয়ার কোনো মানেও হয় না। আমরা ওনাকে নমস্কার এবং আন্তরিক শ্রদ্ধা জানাই এবং আশা করবো আবার কখনো যদি আসেন আরও গল্প শুনবো আইনের। অজস্র স্মৃতি ওর এখনো তৈরি হয়ে আছে, নিবিড় স্মৃতি সমস্ত সেই সব দিনের। লিখেছেন, কিন্তু আরো অনেক বলার আছে। নমস্কার।
Nine.
Dum